I have been putting off recording this video for like a full week. It's a situation that's completely under control. Welcome back to Ro is Reading. I read a little bit of everything in April, it seems. 1 star to 5 star. Horror, sci-fi, romance, memoir, fantasy, contemporary. 3 of these books I already talked about in my Trans Rights Readathon video, so if you want to hear about them, head over there. First up, Witch Hat Atelier, volumes 9 through 12. I'm nearly caught up. Volumes 9 through 12 are kind of the middle chunk of the Silver Eve storyline. I've found this arc to drag a little bit in places, particularly where we cut away from the main plot, which is already split between 4, arguably 5 characters, to set up various side character stories. The cast just feels a little big for me in this point in the story, but, you know, that might end up working in the scope of the overall narrative. The foundation of ethics around keeping witchcraft a secret in this series is so well thought out, and it's genuinely harrowing to see the cast of child characters brush up against it in the tragic ways that they do. And as always, the illustrations are show-stopping. There's a reason that this manga has the reputation that it does. I'm not sure yet if I'm gonna try and read chapters as they come out once I'm all caught up, but I will definitely be keeping my eye on Witch Hat, especially with the new anime coming out to rave reviews. This next one is one of those books that I didn't end up loving, but I did need it at the time that I read it, so it was very nice to read it then. Red Rabbit Ghost by Julian follows Jesse Calloway, a bisexual mixed-race film school student who travels home to his quite homophobic, quite racist hometown of Black Knot, North Carolina, because someone there is messaging him and leading him towards answers his past. A haunted house, etc. That sort of setup. Its main attraction to me is that I love watching characters have self-destructive crash outs, and that's like 90% of this book. I liked the mystery and unraveling of what happened in the first half of the book, and found the final act a little lackluster and politically fence-city. I also haven't decided how I feel about the portrayal of the secondary protagonist Alice's mental health throughout this book. I know that's a shocker in the horror genre, but I did want something from her that wasn't where we ended up, and I feel that Julian was a good enough character writer to get to it. I did love the midpoint reveal of this one, which recontextualizes a lot of things, including the title of this book. I'm not sure the book delivered on that twist, but it was a really neat concept to me. I did find it really interesting to read a highly characterized book starring 2 characters, including an Alice doing her best to live out her own delusions, because right before I started reading this book, I DNF'd Katabasis, which stars its own delusional Alice, and that was mostly for the lack of character writing going on in that book. One reason I finished very few print books this month is that I didn't finish that one. The other one is that I'm still trying to finish She Who Became the Sun. While I didn't end up loving Red Rabbit Ghost, its characters are incredibly well realized. It was a high point of the story. It was also funny to me reading other reviews of this book that called the fantasy elements here a magic system. Like, no, I don't think the author was trying to write magic that fully made sense. We're just out in the swamp doing vibes-based rituals. I gave this one 3.5 pointy stars, aka a lot I liked, a decent amount I didn't, and the song I chose for it was Family Affair by Sly and the Family Stone. I found it on the radio. Next I read I Sexually Identify as an Attack Helicopter, which was the first of 2 stories I read this month that were working off of the premise, what if the military-industrial complex got its hands on this concept? It follows Barb, who has gone through some sort of process in the military to be assigned the gender of attack helicopter, to be a better pilot. And Barb is great at attack helicopter. The story follows Barb and the helicopter's gunner Axis on a mission as Barb explains what this life looks like to the reader. I gave this one 4 stars. Despite this story becoming a transphobic punchline, it does a ton in just like 5 pages, or what feels like 5 pages. I read this for book club, and we had as much to discuss from this story as we usually do from much longer books. It does a really good job of exploring the gender roles we construct and how that internally feels, and how that can cause rigidity and limits, especially in the context of the military-industrial complex. It also gave big Welcome to Night Vale vibes, to the point where I completely forgot the enemy society's name that they're airstriking because I just called it Desert Bluffs in my head. I put Aces High on my playlist for this one. The first of a bunch of graphic novels I read this month, and honestly I got a little too ambitious at the library, was Saint Catherine by Anna Meyer. This follows Catherine, a young woman who grew up Irish-American Catholic and has never skipped Sunday Mass before now. Because of her one mistake, she's being haunted by the legions of hell. Well, maybe she has also made a few other mistakes. This book was very pretty and had a really vibrant cast of characters, but was also very predictable, especially in its more horror-y elements. It's definitely not horror, it definitely skews more literary. It just didn't quite hit the mark for me. I don't know. Maybe people who grew up in religious families will relate more to this. Next up are 3 books I read in one day, because I had to return a bunch of books to the library the next day, or else. The first was Bad Dreams in the Night by comic artist about the internet, Ellis. This is a spooky story anthology that's really going for the urban legends you hear about in the schoolyard vibe more than anything else, I'd say. I wouldn't say these stories are super duper original or scary. I at least had guessed most of the twists by halfway through, but they were a good time for a rainy day. I love a horror short story as a Magnus Archives fan. I gave the anthology 4 stars, mostly because there wasn't really much that detracted from my experience. I also really liked Ellis's little afterword about why he wrote each story. Despite the stylization in the various stories being neat, I found his illustration style a little too clean and tidy for the horror stories he was telling. I like things to be a little more, moist and boundaryless. I think my favorite story here was Milk Door, except why would you pour spoiled milk into the trash? I simply would not get into this situation. But it was Stranger Core, Bone Apple Teeth. It was a good time. I need to read a horror story every once in a while, or I start to feel sad. And then, When I Arrived at the Castle by E.M. Carroll was next on my day of 3 books. It's been on my list for a while, mostly because I've slowly been working my way through all of their published works. This book follows a lovely little cat girl confronting a vampire in her castle, sapphic style. It's taking a lot of inspiration from Dracula and Carmilla and the sort of classic vampire canon and putting its own spin on it. The main draw for me here is Carroll's sensational illustration style, which is sexy, stylized, gory, and kind of everything it needs to be to make the vibes of this story immaculate. They have a fantastic way of intertwining the text of the story with illustration, which is something I really, really look for when picking up graphic novels. It tends to synergize really well. However, do I know what happened? Do I think the author has a definitive decision on what's happening here? Maybe. I have decided on my interpretation of events, but it's just that, an interpretation. If this book made more sense, I would have given it 5 stars. As it stands, 4 stars, and Carroll draws me in again and again. Yeah, I definitely would not recommend picking this book up if you don't like ambiguous stories. The last book I read on my day of graphic novels was Press Enter to Continue by Ana Galvañ. The art was really pretty, which is why I picked this up. I hate books like this because they remind me of sci-fi bros who just sit around at parties and come up with cool world-building ideas and never do anything with them thematically. Maybe that's like a personal distaste thing, but it also does hopefully illustrate the shallowness of most of the stories in this anthology. This one was a rare 1 star. And then my only 5-star read of the month, which definitely is not going to be for everyone. It's 5 stars because it so decidedly suits my tastes as a reader. Never and Again by Justina Ireland asks, what if the North American Army circa 2100-ish could resurrect people? How would that go? It follows Patch, a soldier who has been implanted with nanotechnology that allows him to be brought back from the dead, fighting a civil war in North America while simultaneously being bombarded by nostalgia, a side effect of the nanotech that causes him to relive past memories. It's kind of ultra PTSD, except for good memories. We also follow Gabriella, Patch's platoon's analyst, who gets a bigger picture view of the situation. While I did find a lot of the specific dystopian ideas here to be things that I've read before, honestly, because they seem closer day by day, the fantastic character work really makes this book stand out. The audiobook narrator also does a sensational job of emoting the very intense things that are going on in this story. And this story is intense. I like body horror a lot, and this book was gory enough at points to make me a bit nauseous. If you do not like gore, be thoroughly warned. Truly, I finished this book and went and added a ton of this author's other books to my various TBRs. She might even get me to read a Star Wars book. Honestly, after reading this book, I just need a world where Justina Ireland writes a Stormlight archive book along these lines, because that would fuck severely. My song for this book was Gun by MCR. And then my last book for the month was Tokyo Ueno Station by Miri. It follows a main character who is dead, drifting around the park where he lived as a homeless man for the last decade or so of his life, and remembering various scenes and trivia from his life in no particular order. I am not a huge contemporary or literary fiction enjoyer. Honestly, I only picked this book up because my book club chose it. Very often my complaint with litfic that engages with fantasy element is that they pick very overdone tropes and use them in uninteresting ways, which is kind of how I felt with the framing device for this book, which is unfortunate because that framing device shapes so many things about this book's prose and how it's presenting itself. I could tell it was well researched and really liked the pieces of Tokyo's history that were included, but other than that, it's kind of a nothing burger that overfixates on the main character's trauma and poverty without making much meaning out of it, in my opinion. So 2 stars, I guess? Not a great way to end the month, but I will at least be finishing She Who Became the Sun soon. And that one is a banger book. I also added a couple of these to my book bingo. Here's where I am on that. I think I'm pretty on track to finish this, though I need to read a bit more nonfiction and some focused books. Eventually I'll start picking up specific books for some of these prompts, but that is a future row problem. Thank you everyone for watching. Please comment if you read anything particularly good this month, and I will catch you next time. See ya.